The group of mercenaries could be seen walking together through the forest, lighted by the moonlight. A mercenary with an eye patch tells the merchant leader that he must have been shocked that the ballot bastard saluted him. He continues to tell the merchant leader that words don't work on those barbarians and that he needed to kill them and turn them all into slaves. The merchant leader tells the mercenary that since it was his first time in the deep forest, he wouldn't know it well about how defeating the Balaks in combat was not that easy. The mercenary still felt confident about his skills. He asks the merchant leader about how he felt being scared. And if that was the reason why he brought the mercenaries, he continues to question the merchant leader about how he was going to turn the tables if he got caught. The mercenary lights a match up, saying that the merchant groups and mercenaries had decided to split the gross earnings in exchange for being their escorts. He chose an evil, smug grin on his face with a cigarette in between his lips. He tells the merchant that if it comes to looting, then the mercenaries could treat everything as theirs. The merchant leader was nervous and silent upon hearing the disgusting words the mercenary spoke with, but he soon turns forward and tells the mercenaries to do as they please. The mercenary was happy to hear that and asks a question. He wonders if the ballots were really that special. Since they wanted to exploit nighttime, the group wanted to ambush the ballots while setting them on fire and finally to slaughter them, making them done for the eye patch. Mercenary continued to talk, while two other members could be seen fight over the lit match. One of them grabs the member holding the lit match and tells him to not blow out the match, since he needed to use it too. The guy holding the match decides to hand it over, but he tells the other guy that it was a rule that only two people can use a match and asks them if he at her on the battlefield, that three people aren't supposed to share one match. But the friend didn't listen to him. He continues to light his cigarette with the lit match, telling the other member that he didn't. Believe in such superstitions, an arrow flies directly into his skull just before he could blow one puff of his cigarette. The mercenary with the eye patch continues to talk to the merchant leader about his history and how he caught barbarians and sold them as slaves. But the man didn't even realize that his party was being sniped one by one. Even an arrow reached inches from his face. The merchant leader could only look in shock as blood spilled everywhere from the mercenaries being sniped by arrows. The group of mercenaries began to cover themselves with their shields, but they were still getting sniped by the Balaks. The merchant leaders yells at them to extinguish their cigarettes as the Balaks had found them. The Balaks tribe had appeared with their bows drawn and ready to fire. She commands her troops that she wouldn't allow any of them to hit the mercenaries and merchants anywhere else but their heads. She tells the Balaks that it's time to show them how scary the ballots are. Vaki stares in amazement and wondered if the light from the cigarettes was all the Balak. Warriors needed to shoot their arrows so accurately. Another member of the tribe appears while carrying a 2 barrels. He calls Vikir a slave and tells him that they had finished preparing what he asked for. Vikir reminds him that he was a commoner and no longer a slave. The tribe member tells Vikir that he was being timid for fussing over something like that. The group of mercenaries could be seen cowering behind their shields to block the hail of arrows coming from the Balaks. A bald man orders mages to gather up to block the arrows with the shields, while the aura users prepare to counterattack. An arrow covered in blue arrow is seen flying through the air with a rope attached to it. The mercenaries could only stare as the arrows landed on the trees above them, carrying between the 2 arrows a barrel. More arrows attached with ropes are set flying into the trees. The space above the mercenary group were soon filled with barrels hanging above them. The bald man was alarmed to see that the Balaks had launched alcohol barrels. He looks at the barrels that began to leak a dark fluid. Flaming arrows were then sent flying into the alcohol barrels in the trees. It caused an explosion in front of the mercenaries, which lighted the whole place. The merchant leader hid himself behind a tree. He watches the mercenaries being burned alive and hears their screams of pain. They shouted that the Balak had started a fire. The merchant leader continues to watch the flames engulf the mercenaries, thinking about how the Balak had tied ropes to arrows and launched oil barrels. This was something that was unheard of, as he continues to wonder about how the Balaks had gotten that intelligent oblivious to him. Vikir was walking towards him from the shadows. He sneaks up to the merchant leader. Vikir finally lets out a heavy footstep which catches the attention of the merchant leader. He recognizes Vikir as the metal symbolic bastard. Vikir appears with arrows on his back and with his eyes turned red. The merchant leader pleased with Vikir, telling him that he would regret it if he killed him. He then reveals a piece of paper stating that this was the exploration permit he had received from the underdog city. It was the official seal from the newly appointed deputy council, meaning that if Vikir kills the merchant leader, the Baskerville family will come for him. Vikir then asks the merchant leader if the deputy council he was referring to was named Vikir. The merchant leader immediately tells him that he's right. Vikir said, "How strange, I don't remember permitting that." Flames grew around him, his disguise was removed, and his eyes turned a bloody red. The merchant leader was horrified to see that Vikir's skin looks different from before, but he soon realizes something. "You're really Vikir," was the merchant leader's last words. An arrow struck him straight in the head, body and on the piece of paper he was holding. Vikir, he tells him that those who forge the Baskerville seal are to be executed. Ayan soon appears behind him on her pet wolf Bakura. She still calls Vikir's slave and tells him that they needed to run away. Vikir looks at her and reminds her that he was no longer a slave. Multiple arrows could be seen stuck onto various shields. The mercenaries soon realized that the hail of arrow attacks from the Balaks had come to a stop. They rejoiced in joy and shouted out to one another that the Aleks were retreating. They stated that the fact that the Balak attacked with fire meant that they were not confident. The mercenary group decided to chase after them right away. A member of the mercenary group shouted that if he catches the barbaric, he would butcher them straight away. But just as he was yelling, a familiar pillar of death covered in a purple aura appeared behind him. "It's Queen Madam Legs," she appears, and started to rain down pain onto the mercenary groups. Vikir could hear the screams of the mercenaries as they yelled out that there was a monster. Ayan praises Vikir for calculating the madam's appearance and for thinking of using fire as a tactic. She states that Vikir had become a great Balak now. Vikir continues to look behind. He looks at the Madam Eight Legs as they reached high into the sky while being covered in a deadly purple aura. He tells Ayan that was a disaster. Aquila was wearing a smile on her face as she tells Vikir that she would permit him to enter the hero's spring. She continues by stating Vikir various achievements from resolving the food shortage issue by catching an ox bear, concluding the previous battle without any casualties by using oil barrels, and discovering that the cause of the infection that was bothering the Balaks, warriors, was caused by cheap drugs. She touches his shoulder while the shaman showed a dark expression on his face. Aquila then tells Ayan to take Vikir to the hero's spring since it was a full moon tonight. Ayan agrees and began to stood up. She wraps her arm around Vikir and tells him, serves him right. Vikir was curious by what she meant by that. It turns out she was referring to Ahuman. She tells Vikir to look at Ahuman. Ahuman said that the reason why the warriors were unwell was because they were cursed. But due to Vikir's actions, it caused the Ahuman's words to hold no weight. Now Ahuman could be seen struggling to hold his anger. Vikir wonders if it was really a curse as he recalls the memory when the merchant leader had told him that the sacred tray had been permitted by the Balak shaman, who was the proxy of the forest god night, soon arrives as a full moon lights. Vikir publishes body could be seen submerged in green water. He takes a deep breath and chills in the waters where other animals could be seen floating around. He takes a scoop of the water in his hand, thinking that his mana was taking a step closer to purity. He could feel his broken bones and muscles starting to heal. He noted that the old shaman didn't cause a fuss without a reason. He probably wanted to come here himself. Although it was not as effective as the river of sticks at the Baskerville side, the hero's spring was better since there was no age limit. Vikir then asks Ayen who could be seen soaking in the waters of the hero's spring beside him. He asked her about whether the efficacy would be halved since she was inside the waters as well. Vikir was certain that the matriarch mentioned that only he could go in. Ayen wonders if that was really important since real Balaks. Don't make a fuss about delicate things like that. She then tells Vikir to thank Sir Adonai for finding this hot spring. Vikir wondered who Sir Adonai was. Ayan explains to him that Sir Adonai was the only person who can fight against the madam that lies within the deep forest. He was the best warrior among the Balak legends. She teases Vikir since he had become a dignified Balak. He need to make sure to respect Sir Adonai. But Vikir was reluctant as he tells Ayan that he would respect Sir Adonai only if he fought against the madam head-to-head. Ayan screams him that it was true. She shakes her head in disappointment over the fact that it was hard to communicate with outsiders, but her face started to blush as she remained silent while thinking deeply about something. She recalls her mother's face, who tells her that since Vikir had become a commoner and has a good reputation within the village, she notes that when Vikir recovers with the hero's spring and can become the man he should be, he wouldn't be that bad of a husband. Ayan ends her flashback and glances over to her side. She looks at Vikir's body with his hair pulled back. Ayan decides that today was the day she was going to make Vikir hers.